of him. How about that guy? That was exciting, Emily.
Right here.
That was good. It looked tasty too.
Yeah.
That was kind of a nice setup there. It is Club Hawthorne Live today. We're at our Oakbrook Terrace OTB location, one of our Club Hawthorne locations. And Emily, you look behind us. There's TVs galore here. It is. This is a great place to watch races. And you're going to hear some people probably hooting and hollering throughout the course of the afternoon, too.
We've heard him as we've been here for the last couple hours, and somebody got their single home, which is always nice at a good price at 5 to 1. And, yeah, this is a great location. Even off camera, there's another room over to my right that it's all full as well, and to the left. So, yeah, this is one of the great venues here. A lot of players, when they come out to the tournaments, seem to find this one.
Yeah.
This one seems to be popular.
And it's cool because this is one of our Club Hawthorne OTBs that has a great joint venture partner. So it's good food. There's a great bar behind us. Tons of TVs, so much to be able to watch. It's weird. Today there's a lot of racing action, but early on, not a lot when it comes to field size. So that's something that's a little bit tougher. But like you mentioned, there was just a price at Gulfstream Park, though, a 5 to 1 shot that ended up paying $13. So a nice return there. And it looked like horses were able to come from off the pace. But you have to try to find some value, and that's what we talked about with Club Hawthorne Live throughout the course of our first month or so of doing the show, is trying to find value, and it can be had even in some shorter fields, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes there's a lot of defaulting to favorites and things like that. So we'll try to look at those favorites, try to assess them, and then try to play from there. But looks like we got some rooting for this second race over at Oaklawn. We're 7 to 1 is on the lead, and looking to hold on, and I don't think the person behind us that's been cheering is lost all day. He's just really finding the winners.
And that's one of those things too, but it's fun. And this is the atmosphere you like when you come out to one of our OTB locations. Everybody here, they talk to one another, they chat, they're enjoying racing, they're having a good time, they're having a couple of brews. They're not afraid to hoot and holler and cheer their horse on. So it's something that we really like to see, and it's something that we want to welcome everybody out to come out to our OTB locations. But we're at Oakbrook today. We are at Oakbrook next week as well. Then it's going to be a busy week after, but it's going to be busy for other reasons. You're going to be heading off with our crew to Vegas, right, for the NHC?
That's correct. Yeah, I'll be out at NHC, hopefully doing some live streams out there. Yeah, that's the plan as of now.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. So it's one of those things. Hawthorne does such a great job with all of their contests, so it's definitely worth checking out. But let's run through the race schedule for what we have today. We're only going to cover 4 races live today. We're covering 2 races from Gulfstream Park, 2 races from Tampa Bay down. So we're covering the 3rd and 4th from Gulfstream, races 2 and 3 from Tampa. But it's with good reason, Emily, because there's a really good card tomorrow at Oaklawn Park. We have our pool party taking place tomorrow as well. So there's 2 stakes races that we do want to cover from there, the Honeybee and the Rebel. But I think that pool party could be a lot of fun because there's some value on that card, too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The pool parties are always a good time. I'm looking forward to this card at Oaklawn. They can check out kind of the analysis ahead of time. And as you mentioned, we're going to go through the Honeybee and the Rebel, which are both competitive stakes events, in my opinion. Yeah. So it should be good. There should be some opportunities in those races.
Yeah, and if people want to join us tomorrow for our pool party, it's just $35 for Rebel Stakes Day. The first race we're going to cover will be the Carousel from Oaklawn tomorrow. It goes off just after 3, so that'll be where our first wagers are in. But if people want to jump in, $35, they're going to get a part of the $1,000 wagering pool. They're going to get some food. They're going to get some drinks. They're going to get some program. They can interact with us as well, and we can kind of talk about the way things go. But Oaklawn is a track that you focus on. You've done a great job on the website at HawthorneRacecourse.com and the handicapping site because you dive in depth into these races. But when it's a track that is really a focus of yours, these big days are something that you really have to enjoy too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And with the analysis, because I do take notes there, and I have for a few years.
Yep.
Giving information that's not necessarily in the public space. So it's not so much, who do I like in a race, giving out picks, giving selections, but somebody's coming across that, oh wow, I didn't realize that, or I didn't see that trip. Because sometimes it's a trip from 3 back, or it's a trip from, as we'll see some of these horses that aren't running as close to part, that are running in other places, and just kind of taking that extra time and giving that information to the players.
Right, and you want to be able to get that information. The weather could be a factor. Oaklawn Park today, the track's listed as sloppy. There's about a 50-60% chance of rain tomorrow. So we'll see how that track dries out, because that could have an impact on how some of these horses run in the stakes tomorrow too.
I think the rain is supposed to end early,
Good.
end before noon.
Okay.
So, depending, it's 40 degrees, depends on the wind, like how much they dry out. So
Right.
they're going to try to get that track as dry as possible.
And usually on a big day like that, maybe what it means is they close the track a little early for training, get a little bit more time to do their track maintenance, seal that track up, and that. When you have $1 million race on the card, you're right. You want that track to be as good as possible. And with the big stakes races later on the day, should be a lot of fun. All right, let's jump into the racing action today. As our first race that we're going to look at is the third from Gulfstream Park. They go 5.5 furlongs here on the synthetic. We were talking about their synthetic surface before the show too, and it's for a couple of reasons. I made a point where I loved when they had the multiple turf courses over at Gulfstream Park, just because you had the ability to cover a little bit more there with an inner turf and an outer turf. But you mentioned the synthetic track. If you really watch it and watch the way it plays, you have the potential to make some money on the synthetic surface, because it's how riders ride the track and just how that track's played as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan of the synthetic. I don't mind that surface at all. I think it plays the way the horses run, and as you mentioned, the way the riders ride. So yeah, I don't mind it at all. Obviously, we all love turf racing,
Yep.
but just giving a shout out for the synthetic course here, because that's what we're running on in this third race.
Yeah, and looking at the third race right now, you do see a couple of scratches on the screen there. You take out the 4 and the 6, so it's only a 5-horse field. These are $25,000 maidens in this spot. And like you mentioned, Emily, you always want to start with the favorite and then kind of work from there. The favorite right now is a 3, Rocka Rocka Cruise. This one currently at 4 to 5. It's a horse that comes in off a good effort in that last out. It was a near miss in that last out. Is this a race, though, that you determined? Do we start with the favorite and say we stick with it, or do we try to kind of branch out?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because there's not much value on the favorite. Certainly capable. As you mentioned, it was a good race last out, a winning type race for the level. And even going one race back to that January 6th race, the horse had a complete excuse. So you can draw a line through that race. Certainly a capable type. They've been running against the 1, and then also the 7 ran kind of a decent race at this level, going 2 back to January 11th. So it's just tough, because you have a favorite that can certainly win.
Yep.
It doesn't seem like the 1 or the 7 have that much of an edge. I guess the race 2 back from the 7 gives that horse as much of a look as the 3. So just in terms of value, you could land there. 3 did add the front reps last out. The front reps are back on today. And then there's those 2 new faces in here that are probably just worth talking about, because there's only 5 and we have the time. As far as Jay's Delight, it's of course it's making their first start for New Barn, coming off a layoff, then going back to that trip back in September at Presque Isle. Did have some issues in running, broke slow. The rider held the horse up behind horses, and they've been off since. So it's like you can kind of treat it as a first-time starter. I'd say in terms of class, this is more a lateral move, just like as far as like the race car and purse. It's not necessarily a drop. And then as far as Galactic Jack, tough to know. It's a first-time starter in here. At the same time, it's kind of tough to knock, because if you're looking for a new face, those are kind of your new faces.
I like the looks of Galactic Jack on the racetrack. I thought the horse looked very good in the post-race, looked pretty good warming up, 6 to 1 on the board right now. The workouts, nothing really great by any means, but it's a maiden 25 and it's a short field for the first out. But the barn has won with horses early on too. But the works aren't terrible by any means either.
Yeah, and the other thing we've mentioned about works is I've spent time clocking, and we've talked about it here like on the show, and you as well, is sometimes the works on paper can be deceptive.
Right.
There was a horse that was the first time started that one the other day that had a really slow, long 5 furlong drill, and I watched it, and it was like that horse is only running a quarter, maybe 3 furlongs in that drill, and then had the slower time. So it's so hard to tell. I tried to look up the horse and try to look at the works. There was just kind of nothing available. So we are going off what we see kind of on paper there, but sometimes it is, taking with a grain of salt, especially when you have some advantage by using your eyes and looking at the horse on the track and say, I can make a case for him based on visuals, and there's really no other option.
Right, and that's one of the things. Visually, I think my money would go to the 5 at 6 to 1 Galactic Jack. There, you did mention Jay's Delight in this spot. Edgar Perez, the rider, this was a guy that we saw on the Chicago circuit early on in his career. He's a very aggressive jock. He's also a jock that stays down at Gulfstream year-round. So he's riding this track year-round where some of these other guys come in just for the championship meet. I think that's a benefit when it comes to some of these tracks like the synthetic that is relatively new and they haven't used as much. So I'll be curious to see what we get out of the horse there. You're looking on the screen right now at your favorite. What do you see her out of the 3, 4 to 5, Rock the Cruise?
Kind of acting up a little bit. We kind of use this keyword wasted, where the horse is wasting a lot of energy on the track. So I would say that behavior, along with the short price, probably a negative. Both the 2 and the 5 are warming up, but like within themselves, it's more of a jog. Same, the 1 and the 5 there are both kind of on the screen as we go by. But yeah, there's the 5. They have the blinkers on.
Yep.
Maybe that's a positive as well, just kind of suggesting some intent for this horse first out. But yeah, the visuals on the 3 aren't great, especially when you combine with the price. Could be an additional hurdle at that short price.
Yeah, to me, if the horse beats us, it beats us. I would look elsewhere. The 5, it's a money's baby. You're probably going to see speed. You mentioned the blinkers for the first out, Lasix for the first out. A barn that has won early on, and this is a barn that it's owned and trained by the same person. So they're out there. Everything you kind of go into this because you need these horses ready on race day because nobody else is paying your bills. Your bills are getting paid by performance on the racetrack, and that's something that you do have to take into account there as well. So we'll see what we get out of Galactic Jack in this spot. There's 0 minutes to post for the 3rd at Gulfstream. We should mention the next race is going to be the 2nd at Tampa Bay Downs. They go 7/8 of a mile in that spot. That's on the main track. They're $5,000 claimers. They're still on the walking ring there, so I'll be curious to see. I'm guessing they're going to be a few minutes later because typically they're already on the track by this point, Emily, out at Tampa. So I don't know if there's a delay for some reason or not, but you don't even have riders up there yet.
Yeah, we can probably wait. I think we'll have time, but I think we're going to run kind of in the same kind of conundrum as far as there's the currently 2 favorite,
right.
6 is currently 4 to 5, and then the 5 not far behind at 2 to 1. To me, I thought the race, initially looking at it, was like a 1-6 play. That kind of looked like it was going to be the value, but now the 1 is out. Right. So now it kind of comes down to how do you play this race? 6-5 is no good, and trying to get creative with some of those other horses might be a bit of a stretch there now in the post grade, it looks like.
Yeah,
so kind of hustled right along.
All right, so we'll see what happens. We'll get back to that after the race at Gulfstream. But like you mentioned, there's times where you say you have to beat the favorite. There's other times you might have to just stick with the favorite and either try to work multi-race wagers around or work doubles if you can find value in the next race on a card, or get something around just some sort of a price to get any type of value there. All right, they're walking onto the synthetic surface at Gulfstream Park, so we'll head back out to Gulfstream. For those who haven't tuned into Club Hawthorne Live in the past, the one thing that you want to make note of, you don't hear the audio from the racetrack because we'll give a little bit of commentary on what we see throughout the course of a race, and it's either running position, fractions, if there's trouble or anything like that. And we did see that in the 2nd at Gulfstream Park because you had a shorter field. 4 horses winged it out there in the front, and they were 22 and change, 44 and change. And it was a horse that just sat back, saved ground the whole way around, was able to swoop on by. So if we're seeing something like that, it's something that we'll point out for the racing fans too.
Yeah, I think that's good. Just kind of a different way to look at a race. It's kind of how I take notes as I'm going through, looking at the race shape, looking at position, how riders are riding, horses are finishing.
It's just 5.5 furlongs here, so it's one of those things where the break is definitely going to be vitally important in this spot. Again, it's maiden, so you could have some issues with horses either getting out of the gate poorly. You don't know what you're going to see out of a first-time starter. You're looking at 4 to 5 on the 3 Rocka Cruise. I think we're both going to try to beat that one. We'll see what we can get to me. I mean, the 5 at 8 to 1 is the longest price on the board. I'd rather take my chances there.
I mean, the most upside is there's like that little handicapping angle that's the lesser of evils, right? That's sort of where you're playing with right now.
Yeah, so 3-year-olds here, they're maiden $25,000 claimers going 5.5 furlongs. The last one loading in the gate again is just a field of 5 here in the 3rd in the synthetic at Gulfstream Park, and you're getting a little bit of activity there out of the 7 as well. Not some great signs out of some of these horses that took action.
It makes it just a little bit more wide open than maybe it appeared on paper. All right, they're off.
And of course, my 5.
The 5 broke slow, but I never know. I guess anything is possible. The 3's getting out in front. The 2 is going to show some speed to press. The 1's kind of losing some ground. It's going to try to keep pace, but lost position. The 7 is stocked in that pair, doing their best. As the 2 moved up on the inside, is getting pressed by the 3.
Yeah, my 5's nowhere.
That new face, yeah. The 5 after breaking slow and not showing much speed is going to have a big, strong late kick from here. But the 3's already being ridden along, being pushed along. The 2 looks comfortable. The 1 is starting to make up some ground on the inside. It's been stopped in that pair throughout. So could be looking in that direction as they turn into this final quarter. The 3's kept to a ride. It's going to try to come back. The 2's going to
The 1's getting that rail trip there, too.
The 1's going to try to get that same rail trip. And the 3 didn't change lead. It's been a little bit one pace throughout. The 1 just got that run on the rail, that inside run. Your 5 starting to run on late. Well, probably comes on the super.
Okay, so here's a couple things that you find out of there. Like we mentioned, there were some signs on the 3 that were good reasons to stay away.
Absolutely.
And the horse ran to that. Ran okay. If I'm looking to the 5 next time out, maybe you want to see a gate work going into the next race just to be able to get out of the gate a little bit better for that second start. Maybe 3/4 of a mile, but at least there was a little bit of run late.
Yeah.
But I'd see more of an upside coming out of that race for that first time starter than you would out of the beaten 4 to 5 favorite.
Sure, yeah. I mean, especially if the 3 comes back at a short price.
Right.
Now, if they take the front wraps off and you see a more behaved horse next time around, and the horse gets forgotten on the board, you can start getting creative with price. But really, it comes down to being situational and being the right price.
Yep.
And that's just such an important part. Because, I mean, watching that horse on the track, it's like, I don't love him. He could certainly win. And as soon as you saw those visuals, you're like, toss.
Yeah, you stay away.
Toss.
Yeah.
I mean, just at that point, the horse beats you, whatever, but it's a completely unplayable horse at that
Right.
point.
Yep. It was the right move to stay away from that horse and see if you can find some value. Let's see what happens here in the second at Tampa Bay Downs. As Emily mentioned, they are on the racetrack. They're listed at 2 minutes to post right now. They go 7/8 of a mile. Scratch the 1 Litigant, which I know you were not happy about because Litigant was a horse that was a play for you in this race. It brings you to your favorite right now on the board, and you're looking on the board as your favorite at the 6. Now it's 7 to 5, 8 to 5. Okay, so things are evening out a little bit here between the 4, 5, and 6. Where do you find a price where a horse like the 6 becomes playable?
Well, that was the key with the 1 because I do think that the 6 makes the most sense. It's been running competitive races at this level or similar condition, and is going to come back from the 30-day break. Should have the right running style for this race shape. So as far as checking the boxes as the favorite, certainly makes sense. And looking at I guess my one kind of concern, but it's not as much given the way this race is, was the 7 furlongs, but the horse has run at 7 in the past. As far as the 5, they're going to come off the win, so they're going to have to pair efforts in just 20 days. And that's not always the easiest to do, especially when the horse recorded somewhat of a new top and another horse is going to have to run maybe a little bit longer than they want to, but has some early speed. And that could be the key in this race. There are some others in here that maybe can keep the pace honest, especially the 6 pushing the pace, maybe the 4 a little bit. The 7 also has speed, but it's not necessarily the type of classy speed kind of pop out of there and then baby's going to fade pretty quick. So from that perspective, the 5 could just kind of work a trip. This race was just pretty tough to play. I mean, the 3, it maybe gets underneath. I mean, that's just kind of the ceiling for this horse. There's just not that much progression. He's a little bit on the slow side. And the same thing with the 2 coming off the layoff, shortening up, and was also on the slower side. Those horses are both, legitimate longer type shot horses.
Yeah.
Maybe even too short on the board, to be honest, looking at their odds.
Right. If you're looking at 7 to 5 on the 6, this might be a race where you say, okay, I'm going to take the 6 horse and I'm going to pair it up with horses and pick 3s, doubles, anything, kind of moving on later in the card. Because you're right, everything seems to kind of set up for the horse. The horse has already raced at this level and has raced well. The horse has run at the distance and has run well. I think the 5 is in a little bit tougher than what everybody seems to be at least showing you on the board right now. I think Ricky Salsa is a much more legitimate racehorse in this race. So I'm going to take the chances of that one at 3 to 2 over 2 to 1 on the 5 because I think 3 to 2, I don't want to say provides value, but provides a little bit better price than the 2 to 1 that you get on Old Time Revival.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people forget that even though it's a shorter price, it can be more value.
Yep.
Because if you think the 5 should be 5 to 2 or 3 to 1, then 2 to 1 is an underlay.
Right.
And maybe you think the 6 should be 8-5, but they're currently 7-5.
Right. It's just, that's what you have to do sometimes, especially in these shorter fields. Okay, some horses are long shots and may just be unplayable. Like we think Chill Hayes probably is unplayable in this race, but could add a little bit to the pace scenario. Maybe that compromises a horse like Old Time Revival in here. So Rookie Salsa, the 6 is the one that I would look to in this spot. They're walking into the gate right now at Tampa, so take a look at kind of how things unfold here. Again, 7/8 of a mile in this spot too.
Yeah, I was looking ahead to the doubles to see if there was some value on the 6-7 combination, but it's paid 20, so a little short, but I guess it's a little bit better than taking 3-2. At least getting a little bit lucky and trying to get about 10-1.
I don't mind this gate load here for the shot because you get a little bit better view there. They go over to the head-on shot. We talked about it in prior weeks at Tampa Bay Down. Some of their starting gate locations, if you're looking at the pan view, comes behind trees. So it's really hard to make trip notes for some of these races. At 7/8 of a mile, I think they're blocked in the pan, which is why they stick with this head-on for a while here. I don't mind the head-on to get a little bit of a look for horses coming out of the gate in this spot. But there's a little bit of a key for how things may unfold. And see, there's the pan. You're buried behind the trees, so you have to kind of go off the head-on.
You get a little bit of both, as long as the camera stays there.
And it's in it, exactly.
Looks like the 2 broke a little bit slow. The 6 is showing speed. That was kind of projected with the 7 out in front. The 5 stopped in that pair. Looks like the 5 will kind of move up. Doesn't seem like anybody really wants to lead, and that's why those horses are just kind of there by default. Again, the 4 stopped right behind them. 6 is going to push forward, kind of get out in front, keep 5 to their inside, and as kind of expected, 7 maybe already started to lose a little bit of ground on those 2.
Yeah, 22-4 for the opening quarter, going a little bit faster than I think I would have expected for this level, but the right 2 are the right 2 that are kind of up front, though, pushing it along, too. I'd rather be on the outside if I'm in this spot. How about you if you're watching a race right now?
Yeah, absolutely. The 4's kind of getting that bird's eye view trip of them, I guess, or whatever it is, the catbird seat trip, stalking that pair. It's probably going to be the biggest threat just because they haven't had to take on any stress as they're turning, and the 5 and the 6 have had to duel throughout.
The 5 went to 4-5.
Wow. It'll come into a stretch. It looks like the 4 should get them. 4 can sit in that trip the entire time and was able to pick up those horses with that 7 furlongs. Good stalking trip. And then, as we kind of pointed out, the 5 just wasn't value in that race.
No value, and then became even less value with that late action going down to 4-5 in there. The 6 ran a decent race. To me, I don't think they necessarily needed to be on the lead at 22-4 for the opening quarter, but that's where they ended up.
Yeah. I think I said early on, it just didn't look like anybody wanted the lead, so they just kind of fell into that trip by default. And the 4 got the good trip, was also another class dropper, which kind of left me a little bit concerned on that when you're dropping in class and coming off a layoff, but just kind of turned out to be best horse at the best trip.
Again, the potential to beat some favorites in there. We didn't expect the 5 to go favorite, but that's the one that got that down to 4-5. So you could find value elsewhere in that spot. It was definitely worth the look. All right, we're still 17 minutes to the post for the 4th at Gulfstream Park. So we're going to talk about the first of our 2 stakes races that we want to focus on tomorrow at Oaklawn Park, because we have a pool party that's taking place. It's taking place at the Crestwood OTB tomorrow, Emily. You and I are going to be out there from 3 o'clock until the running of the Rebel, which will be around 5:30. It's going to give us 5 races at Oaklawn that are really good races to look at. But the 10th race tomorrow is the Honeybee. These are 3-year-old fillies in here. It's a full field of 12. You go a mile and a 16th in the spot, so you get the full run of the stretch too. But there's a lot of different ways that you can look in this spot. So where did you kind of start out with in the Honeybee, and then who else do we want to focus on? Because there's so many that you can talk about in here.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at, you have to start with the favorite and also start with the race as a whole, right? Sure. And those kind of 2 things come together because you're assessing Grand Love, who's coming back off the layoff, who has that early speed, has the graded stakes experience, so you can make the case, has that early speed, has some class on her side. She can be upgraded. She was up close to a fast pace in both those races. However, this race can be quite honest, and she's going to have to overcome that and show a little bit more stick than she has in the past. So I can see an outcome where she's winning. At the same time, I think there are some other ways to go in here.
Yeah,
What was your assessment of her?
So when you're looking at it too, and I want to ask you because I'm just glancing over at the plot too.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at the plot, you see, okay, this big circle, this big blue circle around the 3 grand love, but you see some others that are kind of creeping over into that point. What does the plot show you for those that aren't familiar with optics, kind of how things unfold case scenario wise?
Yeah, this is tricky. And we talked about this, my partner and I, John, on the optics video last night. When you have these lightly raced horses that are developing, sometimes the plot isn't quote unquote the most reliable in the sense that you have these horses that are developing. So the 3, for example, has that early speed, is above the par line, but is a big circle. The big circle represents that lack of finish.
Yep.
Now, looking at her running lines and seeing that she's been up close to those fast paces, it's only going to reflect what she's done, and she has lacked finish, but she's had to run on fast paces. If she's not getting as much pace pressure, she could be able to stick around. So I think you use the information that you have, but in a lot of these cases, especially with these light race developing horses, having the trip notes, having the speed figures, watching them develop, kind of more designing like as far as race shape and trip, I think is key.
All right, then you look to the opposite on your grid there, and you go to the 7, wet paint. You're going to see a big orange square around the horse. This one comes from the barn of Brad Cox. He's been tremendous, basically anywhere he goes. Flavian Protza back to ride here. This was the horse that I was actually kind of hoping it was still an off track for, because I think wet paint will run a little bit better if it is an off track. But that was a good effort in that last out. But what kind of a pace and race does a horse like this need to try to win in here?
Well, she really did benefit from the race flow last out. And also, I think just from a physical standpoint, did kind of move up on the off track. Just kind of the way that she handled it, the way the race shape set up. Now, as an individual, she's progressive. She's moving forward with each and every race. But again, it is going to come down to when you're taking a potentially short price, because as you mentioned, you have those connections coming off the wins, coming off a good speed figure, especially if the track is off. People are going to really then they're going to hone in, right? Because, and the thing with off tracks too that people forget is off tracks are so different. Even when they're listed wet fast, it's like there's never 2 wet fast that are the same.
Right.
But I did think the track moved her up. So to me, I mean, she could be a little bit vulnerable just from that shorter price standpoint, and then having to get that trip. Now, the horse that she ran against the Martha Washington, Defining Purpose, will come back in the spot and could just be sitting in the right time and place. She was coming off a big effort in the year's end, and then had a warm up on January 28th. Not so much a fan of that. She was one of those horses that was up close to the pace as well. So could be sitting on her top effort and could get a little bit forgotten, especially with wet paint in the race.
I think she's the horse that is primed to bounce back. This was the even money favorite in the Martha Washington too, and now all of a sudden you're looking at 9-2 in the morning line in this spot. This is one that I'll be curious to see again, kind of what you're going to get for a track setup. Is it a wet fast track? Is it a fast track? And you mentioned that too. Track classifications are really weird. Some tracks, when it first starts raining and they first seal the track, that's wet fast to them. And then it can progress to worse. Other tracks, when it's raining and drying out, then as it dries out, then they go to the wet fast, which I don't really prefer, because I think that's more of that muddy and a little bit more laboring track in that. So you have to go back and look at what the progression of the whole day was to see there. But Defining Purpose, Kenny McPeak has this horse in here, a couple of starts over the track. It wasn't a bad effort in that last up, but you're right, probably a little bit closer to that pace than you wanted to see in there. And I think here they're going to be forced to have to take back a little bit. And I think it's because you get a horse like Olivia Twist on the far outside who probably has to go to try to clear for position. But to me, if Defining Purpose is going to win, it comes from that second flight. And I think that could be the trip that they get in here, too.
Yeah, she's versatile. She has been able to run from off the pace. And I think last out, we saw the same type of pattern with Sun Thunder last weekend in the Risen Star, where coming off a big effort, Ken McPeak ran right back in a stakes. Wasn't the race that they're quote unquote pointing for, but just keeps the horse in condition, which is a very like Ken McPeak type move. And then kind of has him sitting. She's really kind of sitting in a third, off type pattern just to cycle forward. And again, the trip and the run last out, it wasn't bad. unless you back her at a short price, then you can probably complain a little bit. Did you have some other kind of creative ideas in here?
Well,
Some other horses that you were interested in?
I mean, Olivia Twist definitely interested me in this spot. And here's the reason why. This was a horse that was really good in those first 3 starts. Took action going into that last race. Christian Torres has been very good at Oaklawn. He's riding very well. The horse was bet all the way down to 2-1. This was a horse that was out there pushing things along on the front end and then kind of backed out of it. I tend to wonder what they're going to do in here, because with Grand Love near the inside, likely to show speed. Does Olivia Twist go out there and challenge? Do they try the clear? Or do they say, hey, let's see if we have a horse that can rate a little bit? But when you're looking at 15-1, that was the only reason that brought the horse into me for a little bit of interest in the spot, was the price that the morning line odds maker set the horse at. Because to me, if you look at 15 or 20-1, maybe you start making a case for this horse underneath in your gimmicks. Is this a horse that you had anywhere in this spot?
Well, I think she has some challenges in here. She's a little bit lighter in terms of speed figures. You mentioned the trip, which is a challenge. Now, as far as underneath, anything's kind of possible for an underneath spot. But as far as a contender, because she has still, even though she won her first 3 races, she didn't really show much as far as speed figure progression. And that's always a concern with the lightly raced types. You want to see them improving race to race, and she's just kind of been in the same spot. And those races just aren't fast enough for the others in this field. So she's going to have to show a little bit more. And then from the playing standpoint, you need that price compensation. But for underneath, you can start, anything can kind of happen in the chaotic spot.
All right, the other one that I want to ask you about, because you mentioned lightly raced horses, we go to the other end of the spectrum here with the 2 towhead. This horse making its 10th lifetime start already, but 8 and 9 on the board early on in his career. They tried in the Jessamine, and really that was a turf try. Okay, and it's Mike Baker, and you figure they're going to give the horse a turf try early on. The horse was bred to handle the turf. Now you come back here on the main track, but off a couple of really good efforts. Is this a horse that you worry about 10 starts already and it hasn't even been racing a year, or is that just something that is a tendency based on the racehorse?
Yeah, I think the horse, if the horse is running and the horse is running well, you're going to run it. Now, as far as those last 2 races, they were very, very, very good trips. It was just perfectly handled, perfectly ridden. And another horse that has to get faster. Her best race to date is actually over that yielding course at Kentucky Downs, as far as a higher speed figure. And then might just kind of be peaked in her form cycle. But coming off those favorable trips, it was going to find a different race shape in here, with showing that early speed from the inside, especially with some of those others. So just might have to run a little bit faster early than she's had to in the past, coming out of some softer pace races. But on the lightly race side, if we come back to that, number 1, effortlessly elegant. Now this is tough when she's going to step up to take on winners for the first time. And also stepping up from the January 29th maiden race, which I don't think was the strongest field. But effortlessly elegant was very dominant that day. Now, one race doesn't really make a horse, but going 2 starts back, or going 1 start back, to her debut back November, she ran a better than look race and had a lot of trouble in there and recorded a strong speed figure. So I don't think it was out of character to kind of step up and run that race, and showed early speed, I think, because she was taking on a weaker field. And that might not necessarily be a running style. So I always want to caution people, because they might kind of clump her into that group that is going to be forwardly placed.
Right.
And obviously she can run that trip. That in that debut, now granted she did break slow, she closed into a slow pace.
Right.
So she has the ability to pass horses if needed.
Ricardo Santana is normally Asmussen's go-to guy too, but he sticks with this horse for the 3rd straight time. Norm Cassie, nobody's been hotter than him at Oaklawn Park this week too, and you have to take that into account. When you're winning at over a 50% rate at a racetrack, you're doing something right. So we'll see what we get. But as you see there, Emily, we talked about 6 or 7 horses in the race. So there's potential to make some money. When we get to our pool party tomorrow, we're going to start to look at a couple of things. If we're playing multi-race wagers, yes, we'll already have it done ahead of time. But when we get to the race, it might be worth seeing kind of where the betting's going and where we can catch a little bit of a price.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it comes down to, because right now we talk about this, we have opinions, everything's like subjective, and now when we start to bet, we're going to have to really maximize those opinions and take some stands in those races and have that reflect, because you start going, well, what if this one does this, and what if that? And it's like now your opinions
Yeah.
all over the place, and you don't have any value. We have a good sized bankroll, but still, we want to make good bets and have those good fundamentals.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get somebody that gives us a little bit of a run. But as you saw there, it's the potential to spread a little bit. So we'll see what happens in the Honeybee tomorrow. That goes as race number 10 at Oaklawn Park. We'll talk about the Rebel after our next 2 live races, as we're going to shift it back over to the live racing action, go out to Gulfstream Park here. As we go to the turf course, we go 1 mile on the firm turf course. It's the starter allowance company here. Scratch Judge Judith, the 3, scratch the 6 or Rosie's Halo. Get a field of 7 to line up. Right now, it's only a 2-1 favorite here with Don't Mess with Tess. That's a horse that's been pretty consistent of late. But as you mentioned, we start with the favorite. So where do you put a horse like Don't Mess with Tess in this spot?
She's coming off kind of a taxing effort to get that most recent win, and it could be a horse that has some early speed in a race that there is a lot of pace signed on, and that could see her vulnerable. So at a sharp price, not one that I'd be leaning on and create some opportunities elsewhere.
There could be opportunities elsewhere. And when you look at the scratches, they took a little bit of horses that at least would be poorly placed in here. What about like the Force, Sunacha in this spot, a horse that wired fields in each of those last couple? One was a maiden score, the other was a 35 on 2. So class-wise, this is a much tougher spot. Is this the one horse that if anybody could possibly beat Don't Mess with Tess to the top? Is this the horse that could do it?
Well, she has a similar running style to the 7, so I think she's going to be part of that contentious early pace. There is some price competition between the two, so if you're going in that direction. But as far as that race on February 1st, there is a horse out of that race that I'm interested in, and that's number 8, Maria's Honor. Maria's Honor had traffic troubles legitimate. She was buried down inside and then finished a full second faster than the other horses in that field. She has that subtle kick. She has some subtle trips along the way. It kind of seemed like a type that kind of had to race herself into figuring things out. And maybe that's the key. And she was claimed last out and will make her first start. And just a horse that intrigued me enough, especially with some pace to run at, knowing she has a strong kick, has a strong rider aboard. One that I was certainly interested in, I figured would be a price in this race, and still is, even with the scratches.
Yeah, you get Jose Ortiz in the saddle here. Jane Sabelli was like the queen at Tampa Bay Downs for years. Does multiple training titles, horses winning a high percentage. The stable has shifted over to Gulfstream Park with some horses, but again, you're finding value on a horse that, like you mentioned, there's so many that could kind of push things along up front early on and may come back to the field here. This is the horse that just might get the dream setup in this spot, and you're getting some value here at 7-1.
Yeah, that's sort of the way I saw the race, especially with the 7 being a favorite, and some of those other horses, as you mentioned, the 4 is able to show speed. The 2 has some early speed. Even the 9 might be one of those horses that kind of has to go from that position as well. And just the overall off-pitch plot has a speed rate as a 72. So even if you don't see a lot of horses that want to be on or near the lead, you could still see a fast pace for the distance. So it was kind of the horse I was the most interested in this field based on that last race. And a lot of those horses kind of coming out of similar conditions races overall. The one is also worth a mention in here, currently 6-1 on the board. A horse that also had some legitimate trouble in her most recent start.
And this is a horse that not only had legitimate trouble, but that was the 8-5 favorite in the race that Don't Mess with Tess comes out of. And now you're looking at just the difference here from betting aspect, with the 7s at 5-2 and the 1s at 6-1. A play in here might even be boxing the 1 and 8 in the spot, seeing if you can catch a little bit of value. We're watching kind of as the scroll goes by. I'm curious to see what that exacta will pay is going to be with the 1-8-8-1. It'll be popping up in a second, but it wouldn't surprise me if you get a little bit of a price in there as we're 1 minute to post. But when they go to the turf, it's usually a couple of extra minutes. We're just waiting for that next click because I want to see what that 134 right now.
Yeah.
Okay, that might
very square.
Yeah, that might be a route you want to go here. Maybe box the 1 and 8 in the spot because both provide value and both have the running style that seems to suit.
Yeah, both have some finishing ability. They have some form coming into this race, numbers that stack up with the others in this field. And the 7 being a soft favorite.
Yeah.
That's sort of where it starts, of not being afraid to take that horse on. Now the 9's coming in a little bit in terms of price. We can start to look at that horse as far as being an individual and as far as value. One that's going to make their first start of the season, coming off the layoff, and never run on this circuit. They're keeping the horse protected, which is going to be a positive sign. But following this one up at Woodbine, she really doesn't have much of an edge in this race. A little bit softer as far as speed figures and numbers. Maybe the fact that Rod Ortiz the board, it could be the reason that this one's taking some money. But another horse that I don't think the odds are just a little bit short for this individual.
Yeah, first start out of the year, a trainer that is dominant in the circuit up in Canada, Woodbine. It might have just been, let's get some of these horses down to Florida to get a start over the course of the winter on the grass as well. But really, the end goal, I mean, you look at all the past performances, it's grass at Woodbine. That's where they want to be in the end with Silver Magnetized. I'm with you. I would probably stay away from that one just based on the value in here as they're circling around. We should mention the last race that we're going to cover live. The horses are in the paddock. That's the third at Tampa Bay Downs. So those are $16,000 maidens. They go 3/4 of a mile. Somebody's winning at the slot machine.
Yeah, I hear that taking around. There's a lot of action from every direction.
There is. There's action from every direction.
Everybody seems to have winners. It's
That's
amazing.
good.
Yeah.
That's good. You're seeing the hoot and holler. And right now, there's really no live races going, so that's why you're not getting the hoot and holler. And I think you're going to get it for this race at Gulfstream, because here's the other thing too. If the horses that we like run well, when you're looking at kind of how the race unfolds, you're not going to see either of them in the screen early on. Wicked Mercury maybe will rate a little bit closer. Maria's Honor is probably going to sit much further back, so it's one of those where you're following the trackist at the bottom of the screen too, and you're following those chicklets, and you're not going to see a 1 or an 8 possibly. And then when they come into the lane, then they show up. That's where people get loud. That's where people get excited. Everybody likes cheering on that horse coming from off the pace. Sometimes they need that dream trip to win. I don't even know if they need a dream trip to win in here, because there's so many horses that could push things along out there early on too.
Yeah. I mean, this type of level, and even on the turf, I mean, the trips and the class usually come into play. So I think we'll still have that. But yeah, it'll be interesting how they ride this race, how fast they end up going early, and how much contention.
I'm looking to see what's going on. Is this the start of the Rainbow Six? No, is that later?
That's later.
All right, it's later. I'm just wondering why they're still circling. Yeah, they're 0 minutes supposed to. I mean, typically they take a little bit extra time, but because of that, we need to mention a little bit what's going on over at Tampa Bay Downs, because they are on the track there for the third at Tampa. Again, 3/4 of a mile in that spot. It's a field of 8. We're going to mention a couple of horses just real quick as they're walking onto the grass. But you look at Tampa, your favorite right now is the 7. That's Dude First Darling. That one's only made 1 start on its career, so have to see what you get out of that race, or see if you can find some value elsewhere in here.
Yeah, I mean, that was a sneaky good race, and the horse should improve and also benefit from the added ground, but has been off 314 days, so that's something to consider as far as the 9 to 5 price in this race. It was one that I was certainly interested in, but the price isn't that exciting, to be honest. And kind of expected that when I was looking at the doubles. Thought the 7 would end up taking a lot of money. And the 1 isn't far behind, who is the morning line favorite, the Sweaty Fox, a horse that's been maybe just a little bit faster than these others and could just catch the right field, as they're both currently 2-1.
Yeah, and there doesn't appear to be a ton of early speed in this race, so because see, maybe Luna and Maria, the 4, could get into the mix just because they put the blinkers on, have that ability to press the pace. It ran an improved race in that last out. I still don't know if they're fast enough in there, but at least that's a horse that if you're looking for a little bit of a value, they're currently sitting at 12-1 on the board. But Emily, they're walking into the gate here for the 4th at Gulfstream Park. So we'll see what we get for impressions out of here. Again, your favorite right now is the 7 at 2-1. That's Don't Mess with Tess. If you and I are playing, I think we're probably working things around the 1 and 8.
Around the 1 and 8, absolutely.
Getting 5-1 on the 1 horse. That's not a bad price on a horse that was 8-5 last start out against similar horses in here. And then again, Maria's Honor, it's 9-1 with Jose Ortiz, Jane Sabelli, first off the claim too.
And with that trip last out and showing that strong finish, sneaky strong finish.
We're hoping here that we're going to get a quick and contested pace up front early on, and that would be a beautiful thing if they can go fast and have, say, 3 or 4 horses that are not the 1 or the 8 up front there. But they are in the gate here for the 4th at Gulfstream Park, so we'll see how they get away. Again, it's a mile on the turf. I do expect that you're going to have honest fractions up front early on. We'll just see how honest they are with the last one walking in. That's the 9. Silver Magnetized in the spot. The horse that we think probably will be a little bit better suited than Woodbine up. That's, Crystal Court. That was one of those that we thought could be a part of the early pace. Here's the thing. When you see that, though, typically they load back in, and 1 of 2 things are going to happen. They're going to be so keyed up that they're going to wing it out there on the front end and push things along. or they're going to completely miss the break. That was a good job by the assistant starter, though, to grab hold and not allow this horse to run out, because when you lose a horse like that, it completely kills your pace complexion of a race, too.
And then all those horses that have to wait in the gate wait in the gate as well. There's a horse coming up at Oaklawn over the weekend where there was like a 10-minute delay. And those are things that you don't see on paper, right? But it impacts those horses when they're having to wait, circle around. All right, and they're off.
The one got away way better than I would have expected, actually.
Yeah, well, didn't have that excuse last out. They're going to take the 8 back to try to save ground. The 9 broke slow, which is one we thought might be a little bit closer to the pace. They're rating the 1 on the lead with the 4. The 7 is a horse that we thought would show speed, and it actually wants to show speed. That horse is trying to pull, and they're trying to rate, and that's giving the 4 the lone lead right now. The 1 is going to stop, move to the outside, get off the rail, try to stay in the clear, which is probably the good move for this horse. It doesn't look like they're going too fast on this course, especially with the rails out at 35 feet, where speed can be good. The 2 sitting in more of a loose pocket trip. The 7 uncovered, 7 covered up. Sorry, the 5 is uncovered in the second flight.
But at least the 8's in contact with the field there.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's the pace, and then they just kind of had to drop back to save ground. Probably hope for a little bit more of the pace to develop in front of them. I think the 7 rating back kind of changed that complexion a little bit. The 1 is getting a good trip right now.
One's getting a real good trip,
sitting right off that 4. Maybe not the best tactical decisions on the 7.
No.
But we'll see how this race unfolds. The 8 has run, just might have a little bit too much too late. We're going to have to see. The 2 got that trip, and they're swapping. We'll see.
One's battling between horses. 8's charging on the outside. I mean, we're getting run out of the horses that we wanted. Let's see if the 8 can get up. Oh, that's going to be tight. Yeah, that's going to be really tight between the 2 and the 8. But here's the thing, like you mentioned, when they went out there and the pace complexion changed a little bit, the 8 was a little bit closer. Really no excuses for the 1. I mean, by any means, they're right there. It's between the 2 Crystal Coastal horse that broke through the gate prior to the start, and then the 8, the horse we're cheering for in here. That's Maria's Honor. So we will see what happens. We're going to shift over to Tampa Bay Downs here real quick.
A little nervous here. Okay.
But that's good, though. I mean, it's nice that the horses both ran. Well, the 1, take nothing away from this. It's so hard on the turf because you're going to see a couple red. I think the 8 might have got there. All right, let's hope that we're right. But let's shift over to Tampa Bay Downs.
Got to get a little lucky.
Yeah.
As far as Tampa, a little bit of a shift is the 1 just taking favoritism at 6 to 5 to the morning line. The 7 tripped a little bit, 5 to 2.
I'm just trying to peek up at Gulfstream as we go. We don't. Well, oh, it's going to be close. I think the 8 got it. So we'll see what happens. Here's the crazy thing: they bet $1 million on that race at Gulfstream Park. So the bettors definitely were involved. So we're awaiting the result of that photo. We will definitely get you. And it is the 8 at 8 to 1. We'll take that.
All right.
So here's a good thing. So we beat the favorite at 2 to 1. You got 8 to 1 on the 8 Maria's Honor. It just, you're right. So many things set up for that horse to run a really good race. And it was a patient ride out of the jock, too. I like that you saved ground all the way through the turn and then angled out in the lane. So
and had that sneaky finish, man. That one was really hard to find, that closing kick. But yeah, coming home a full second faster than I was like, I have to play this hard. I know it's going to be a price. Should have the right pace.
That's a great play.
Got a good number in the end too, even with all the scratches.
Yeah, with the scratches there, it's a great play. You never know if the 2 breaking through the gate was enough for that one to get beat by a head in the end. That was a really good effort out of Crystal Coast. All right, let's go over to Tampa Bay Downs. So you go 3/4 of a mile in here, $16,000 maidens. This is the last of our live races. If I'm looking just of what we see out of this field, I think maybe the 4 Luna Maria is worth a little bit of a play just because of the price in here and the potential to show speed, but you're also going to need some luck because you're going to need probably the 1, the Sweaty Fox, to not go, and something that just to work out quirky pace scenario-wise. But for you, looking as they're walking into the gate, kind of where are you working things around in this spot?
It's tough. I mean, I was giving a look to the 7. It's on a drift a little bit, but it's still kind of short. A hard time getting to a lot of these horses. And tough to take a short price on the 1. The 1 can certainly win.
4 to 5 now.
I know.
Man, but you're right. I mean, this is the favorite. It's your logical horse in here.
Yeah, even the 8, it's like the 8 should be in there, just finally getting some clash relief, getting back to the level where it was a mildly competitive race back on February 5th. But the one just have an edge.
Yeah.
They dropped the horse in class last out.
Right.
It was a good effort, showing speed, was involved in a duel. Not necessarily the fastest pace, but
the one's on paper, the one's a faster horse than the 4. It's just a matter of what you want to do value-wise, price-wise. We just saw a horse take a ton of late action in the second at Tampa Bay Downs, and then disappointing there as your favorite at 4 to 5, which we thought was a horse that could be beat. You mentioned the 7 Dudes First Starling, a horse that definitely figures in here. But as we're breaking from the gate, we kind of see how things unfold. I'm curious. I expect the 4 to at least get hustled into the mix, but I think the 1 is the one that you do have to try to beat in this race.
Yeah, he was able to get out in front, kind of fairly easy. The 4 stalking there. The 7's going to go out and push the pace, which isn't too much of a surprise, knowing they did have some trouble out of the gate on debut. But those 2 setting the pace, the 6 is wide. 2 was able to save ground. The 4 stalking between those horses. Out behind them, you have the 3 saving ground on the inside. The 8 well off the pace, which for this horse probably could have been a little bit closer. The 1 just kind of separated.
This race might be over. I'll be happy if the 4 runs second, though.
The 7 just backed up completely. The 1's going to separate, and it's a game of chase at this point. For the minors and for this horse.
Right. It's a 1-horse race right now. I mean, what you get that, I'm really happy with the run out of the 4 right now.
The 4's in there, the 7's
but does he fall apart, right?
Yeah, the 4's still on that left lead, kind of struggling a little bit. It could be a battle for place. We'll see the 7's able to come back, but the 1's able to hold pretty logical result, 174.
I don't mind that, though. The effort out of the 4 I thought was pretty good to get into the mix. The horse ends up finishing 3rd. It was the logical horses in there, and one of those where, again, when you're looking to kind of wager around that race, maybe you try to hook them up in an exacta, or you say, okay, these favorites are the ones that just you have to go with, and you go to a pick 3, pick 4, something along those lines. All right, it's the end of our live racing. Hey, we got our $19.80 winner, Maria's Honor Falchion. Really? There you go. You're a youngster.
Well, I haven't heard that much.
You're a youngster.
Sure. All right.
I'm born in the 70s, so you are
shout out Team 1980 with Jason Beam and Ed DeRosa.
Really? Beamy?
Yeah.
Oh, Beamy's my guy. He's a good dude. He's a great race caller. I'm so glad that he has gotten the opportunity that he has.
So Jason's like one of those people that he's so incredibly talented. He's such a good guy, and it's rooting for him every day. I love the content he's putting out. Always just something new, something good.
He's always positive.
Yeah. He's one of the talents, one of the big talents in this game.
He realizes that we get paid to go to the races for a living. So it's one of those things where he takes it wholeheartedly each and every day. But yeah, I love listening to his race calls. It's awesome. He's a good dude. All right. Now, the last of the races that we want to focus on is the big race tomorrow at Oaklawn Park. This is going to be a race that rounds out our pool party, which is taking place at our Crestwood location tomorrow. It's the $1 Million Rebel. Goes 1 mile and a 16th on the main track. It's a grade 2 here. 50 Derby points on the line, I believe, for this race. And then we're coming up, the next set of races will be the hundreds. God bless you, Dakota, the guy that shows up in the commercial sneezing off camera next to us. Thanks, buddy. Field of 11 for the Rebel. I thought there was some chance at some prices. Brad Cox still has some horses in here that are in the mix. So why don't we just start with the inside with the 1 verifying and work from there. Florent True for Brad Cox. These 2 were just winning in Louisiana last weekend, and they have a horse there that should be in the mix.
Yeah. I think they were kind of prepping for the Rebel, getting that race off the bench back on January 14th. Did have a perfect trip that day, and that was sort of my one concern with this horse in this full field is that he's just kind of doing something new where he does have that bigger field, does have the inside draw. He's going to kind of have to work a trip, and outside of that, seems very well met in this spot, has the numbers that stack on par, has been tested in graded stakes company. And really, it just could come down to how short is he going to be, because people might drift in the stablemate's direction or go a completely different direction.
And that's the thing. For those that watch and wager on races time and again, we saw Brad Cox favorite get beaten in Louisiana last week by a horse that was a little bit longer priced. Some people just think, okay, well, that's automatic. I'm going to try to beat that favorite. I'm going to go to the second Cox horse, which in here is Giant Mischief. It doesn't. You have to take the race for what it is. You can't say, okay, well, he did it last week, so that means the longer price is going to win this week. It may not necessarily be the case. It doesn't mean Giant Mischief can't win in this spot, but I don't think you're going to get nearly the value that we caught out at the fairgrounds last weekend.
Yeah, and that's where it was kind of talking about verifying like how short he's going to be, because Giant Mischief could be almost the same
Right there,
price.
yep.
It's really going to depend. I think there's a lot of people that like this horse. His number at Keeneland is a big number. Where that number kind of stacks up is not American Lion.
Oh,
No, Arabian Lion.
Arabian Line.
Yeah,
Arabian Line, yeah.
No, not Arabian
Oh, Lion,
Lion.
Arabian Line, yes.
Yeah, ran those two finished 1-2
Yep.
in that race. And it's a backward horse that really hasn't done anything since.
Yep.
And Giant Mischief ran well in the springboard mile. He broke slow. The move was a little bit, it made like this big kind of burst. And then kind of messed up the timing movement, in my opinion, to finish a good second. But this is a step up in class, and he's going to give a recency coming back on the 70-day frame. So it's another horse that's going to come down to what that price is going to be. Now, if you like verifying, you're probably hoping it does come in a little bit on Giant Mischief, and maybe the other way around. If you like Giant Mischief, you're hoping verifying does. None of those horses would surprise me. Well, maybe Giant Mischief would a little bit.
It's interesting.
I think he does have big horses.
Yeah, and it's interesting here because Drew rode Giant Mischief, like you mentioned, the last couple. Maybe it was the ride, which is why he's not on the horse this time. But he goes over to verify it, so it's not like it's a massive loss for him by any means. One I want to touch on here was the 4. That's Gun Pilot. Ricardo Santana for Steve Asmussen. The last 2 races at Oaklawn, not bad by any means. And the race 2 back was a second-place effort behind verifying going the mile. I think the longer they go, it helps a horse like Gun Pilot in there. Is a mile and 16th enough? Maybe this horse wants a mile and 1/8 or even further. But do you put a horse like Gun Pilot in the mix in this spot?
Sure. I mean, he's a lightly raced type that's been competitive in all 3 starts. Another horse that's had some foundation at this point, does have to step up, does have to work a trip. I think price could come into play. The race is coming out of on February 4th. It wasn't a race that was super strong,
right.
And he was very dominant that day, just for what it's worth. But he's going to have a class test here. Again, does have to improve, has the foundation under his belt. And I think a lot of the attention will land on him because people, for the jockey thing that we just talked about, Santana's landing there. He's taking off the number 3, Red Brown 1, a horse that just finished second in a graded stakes race. Sort of my theory on this, and obviously I don't know, is Santana's been aboard Gun Pilot for all 3 starts, right. And I'm probably sticking with him. Where he was aboard Red Brown 1, he's been aboard the horse 3 times, but none of them are wins.
Right. So
making a change to another rider, I don't necessarily see that as a negative in this case. And as far as Red Brown 1, he's coming in the Southwest, which is a good race. Again, we saw Sun Thunder come back and run a very good second last weekend from that race. Probably one of the stronger runners. You mentioned Arabian Night.
He's a legitimate racehorse.
Absolutely, finishing second. That was a better than looked at for Red Brown 1. Had the kind of the upside, had the foundation from those graded stakes races, and just might be the progressive type coming into this race. It could be a price because I think people will kind of shift away with Santana going elsewhere.
Yeah, and this is a horse that I think if you do get a little bit of moisture in the track, Red Route Run maybe does move up a little bit here too. Now, we talked the last couple of weeks about how a lot of these horses trained by Bob Baffert, if they want to get points, they have to go to another trainer. It had to happen by the end of this month. So you see the 6 reincarnated here. He's not moving too far. He's going from Baffert to a Baffert assistant in the past in Tim Yaktine. They did this last year with some horses too, and those were horses that were showing up in the Derby. They choose to leave California, though, with this horse, and they head out here to a race that is a tough race. Is it because they feel this horse can't be competitive in California because there's so many Bafferts out there, or do they feel this horse just can be one that could handle the shift? Where do you put a horse like Reincarnate in the mix, I guess, is the best way? Because they're 7-2 in the morning line to me, so I thought that was a little short.
Yeah, I think so, too, especially when he was the longest price in a short field last out. And it's been kind of tough with these runners because they've been facing off against the other former Baffert stablemates in a lot of those races, and that's been the case for Reincarnate. When winning the Sham, he was able to stay on with a little bit of pace pressure. It was a 5-horse field, but One of the horses ended up pulling up. One of the other horses was a turf horse, and then the other two were the barn mates.
Yes.
The second place finisher did come back and win a stakes race, so that's positive. But the price is going to be a little bit short on a horse that has done his best running on or near the lead, and is going to find other pace pressure in here. So again, with this horse being any surprise, not really, but has those hurdles to overcome.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about price compensation.
Yeah, and that's what it's going to come down to. Again, this is going to be the last race that we play in our pool party tomorrow at our Crestwood location. We're going to have to wait and see what we can get for value when we go to playing there. Is there some other routes that you can look to in this spot where there could be value?
Well, I do want to mention one more horse here, which is Confidence Game.
Yep.
Soon the horse coming out of Oaklawn, which was his first start of the form cycle. He is wide against the flow. Now, going into that race, because we talked about it, the horse that I had mentioned has kind of done his best running when he's been on or near the lead. So it could be one of those horses that kind of gets caught up in that. But ran kind of a good race that day, noting he was against the race dynamic. It still could have some upside. So one of those horses at a price that is at least worth a mention right now, and one we'll probably discuss when it comes post time, just kind of given the expected odds.
I think if we're playing multi-race wagers tomorrow, that's a horse that you definitely have to throw on the ticket regardless.
Sure.
Just because you're going to get that decent price. Who else we use, we'll just have to see kind of how things unfold. James Graham, he's a very good rider. He spends a lot of time down in Louisiana throughout the course of the year, rides in Kentucky a lot. He started his career here in Illinois. I hustle book for a bug rider at the same time he was a bug. So when you're having a battle for business against James Graham, it was very hard to do. But such a good guy. He's a very good rider. We actually saw him win the Illinois Derby aboard Multiplier a few years ago. But he's a guy that definitely knows what he's doing in the saddle, and I think he'll get a good price there. But Emily, it's going to be a lot of fun tomorrow for our pool party. We're going to start it with the carousel, which goes as the 7th at Oaklawn Park tomorrow. But if they want to find any of the analysis that you put out there, you did an in-depth look at the entire card tomorrow for Oaklawn, right?
Yeah, I really did. I mean, I knew we were playing it, and I just know a lot of people will be playing it and looking for that detail. So it's up there. A lot of the Club Hawthorne players pick Oaklawn this time of year, so I'm trying to put a little bit extra focus on that track.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun tomorrow, so we hope that you can join us at our Crestwood location for our pool party tomorrow. Again, we're going to start right about 3 o'clock. The carousel goes off at 3:06. We'll be there a little bit ahead of time because we need to talk through tickets and get stuff out there. It's $1,000 that we get to put on the line. We're going to try to make some money for everybody, but hey, for just $35, they get into the betting pool, they get a program, they get food, they get drink. It's definitely worth jumping into, and Crestwood's a great location too.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're kind of on the fence, like, oh, I don't really want to go out there by myself, just come out and come talk to us. We're both very approachable, so encourage anybody that wants to come out to do so.
Yeah, come visit us for sure tomorrow. Hopefully we can see you at Crestwood. But that wraps things up this week for Club Hawthorne Live. Hey, if we get a $20 winner, we feel really good, especially when we covered just 4 races. But it was a whole lot of fun today, Emily. Again, we're going to be back here at Oakbrook next week, and then you're heading off to Vegas for the NHC. You're going to see a lot of great players in a couple of weeks, too. Players that you've played with and played against in the past as well.
That's right. And even before then, we get to see opening day at Hawthorne.
Right, opening day at Hawthorne, Sunday, March 5th. And I'll tell you, we have a lot of horses on the grounds this year. It's nice when you look at work tabs and see days with over 100 horses working. So more horses fit and ready to run this year. We're going to race Sundays and Thursdays for the first 3 months of the year, and Saturdays in after that. But it will be a lot of fun. We moved to the Thursdays because there's not a whole lot out there to watch a wager on. So you saw what we were doing with Gulfstream and Tampa. Hopefully some people will do that with Hawthorne as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the race is playable. I'm looking forward to another season.
And I'm looking forward to another season as well. Hopefully you're looking forward to joining us tomorrow out at our Crestwood location for the pool party, and hopefully made you a little bit of money today. For Emily Gullikson, I'm Jim Miller. It's another edition of Club Hawthorne Live. We'll see you again next week.